Aphoristic Appendage to On Truthtelling. 1451 to 1500. 1451. When a close relationship has ended, it can be as if the loved one has departed from this world and happily, all too happily, taken up residence in another. 1452. In an argument one is always overstepping oneself, and in an aphorism trying not to. 1453. Arguments in general take in as much energy, detail, precision, and relevance as is necessary to persuade others. Aphorisms, on the other hand, are generally of a different order. That's also, at least to some degree, a higher one. It's a higher level of integrity they aim for and arrive at by, first, taking in all aspects of the human condition, second, not letting any of them drop out of sight for the sake of convenience or out of fear of consequences, and, third, never failing to hold up the mirror to the aphoristic nature and style as much as anything else. To this end, escaping moral and metaphysical constraints, as far as possible, along with not concealing their dogmatic and uncertain character is their be-all and end-all. 1454. Given that light-heartedness, friendliness, and flexibility will often achieve what hard-headedness and criticism won't, there's nothing to be said against them if they're not at the expense of one's character. 1455. Generally speaking, insults are used by people who can't argue. Politicians are often examples of this and sometimes monstrous exceptions. 1456. When there's big money in the game, a straight path won't always go crooked but, barring exceptional circumstances, will still wander from time to time. 1457. A great though understated and even overlooked difference between human beings and animals is the first's being discreet to the point of obsession about certain bodily functions. 1458. Many if not most people work hard most of the time but otherwise go on a mental holiday. Ask them something about such and such a country or such and such a historical figure and they likely won't know. The majority of people are therefore experts in some areas but ignorant in most others. It's unlikely they will admit this, however, if they watch the TV news. 1459. Contrary to what we often think, people aren't inclined to spend a lot of time thinking about our faults and failings because they have enough of their own to worry about. 1460. A recipe for a series of rocky relationships is being difficult to please while not pleasing others. 1461. As strange as it might seem, there are some people who prefer to suffer than be in the same situation day after day even if it's a good one. 1462. No man can become a god, but there are certainly those who, wielding great power, have taken on the likeness of one and even the devil himself. 1463. For the sake of having courage and inspiration in dishonest times, we subscribe to the following maxim: the truth is like a citadel that, though it be often laid siege to or racked by mist and storm, awaits the clearing day when, in peaceful repose, it reminds us all of its enduring strength and stability. 1464. It should be borne in mind that a corporate decision isn't necessarily the result of collective knowledge and wisdom, although this might be operating at some level, but perhaps one person's will simply being forced on others. 1465. Politicians of all stripes play a short game despite all their talk about the future, cf. the Thousand-Year Reich, the death of capitalism, the saving of the planet, and so on. But how could it be otherwise given that a human life is short, a political career even shorter, and the time to the next election shorter still? 1466. After a certain age, when one gets information about someone one hasn't heard about for a very long time, one usually has the experience of getting bad news that was more or less expected. In some rare instances, however, if the person seems to be doing well and carrying on as before, it's like hearing about a resurrection. 1467. When we're very young, it seems that time will stand still to let us have a thrill. When we're older and this illusion's gone, time, now not so much our song, merely rocks along. 1468. The opinions of others is such a powerful mirror that it not only reflects but shapes us. 1469. We habitually pass judgment on the faults of others that are often simply bad habits we don't have. This bad habit of ours includes dealing rather leniently with our own. 1470. The betrayal of the spirit of science can be easily recognized as the claim to having everything settled. 1471. Anyone who thinks the present age is everything and past ages of no great concern is surely not one of those who, whether he be a historian or not, can't live without experiencing a life much longer than a biographical or biological one. 1472. The use of the word science by politicians puts it much closer to an answer based on self-interest than a question based on self-knowledge. 1473. Thinking one knows the world by watching the news on TV is like thinking one knows the neighbor by listening to gossip. 1474. Dying is being forced to abandon the strongest habit we have. 1475. There are perhaps social ills so widespread and deep-rooted the only cure for them is catastrophe. 1476. At the start of 1914, Europe was the great chessboard on which the masters of the world played their game. Then, some months later, the war broke out and, after 4 years of unprecedented slaughter, many of these great players on the political scene weren't around to continue their game. 1477. If there were to be more fairness in the world, we would have to cast a more critical eye upon ourselves than is currently the case. This is notwithstanding the fact that, for many people and for many reasons, criticizing others is the only way to go. 1478. Honesty is the best policy except in politics. 1479. How bizarre these people are who set themselves up as judges who can tell between good and evil but are quick to abuse others. How bizarre then so many of us. 1480. What? You say you believe everything you hear on TV about this matter that's deeply affecting our society because so many experts are in agreement about it. Well, there are many points to consider, but let me raise just one. There have been times in the past, cf. slavery, colonialism, eugenics, anti-Semitism, where experts or so-called experts were in agreement about things. However, if they expressed their views today, we know where they would be. 1481. There are not many things in this world one can be sure of, but one of them is that the politics surrounding climate change will change more than once, perhaps even a number of times, before the climate does in any significant way. 1482. With respect to oneself and no one else, one shouldn't think of one's good deeds and past accomplishments as having more value than pleasant memories and thoughts that, if lucky, one will take to the grave. 1483. The near future is certainly visible to us as something to be planned for, but the distant future with its lack of content as precise and comprehensive knowledge is as hidden from us as the far side of the moon or, perhaps better, the center of the sun. 1484. We tend to think of the future with ourselves as part of it, which partially explains our short-sightedness in this area. 1485. All the pressing issues of today will one day have gone, but our closeness to them now prevents us from seeing this. 1486. For the greater glory of Rome, the stupidity, corruption, and power-seeking to be found in human affairs seems to be a constant throughout history. Their center is the city where intrigues abound, like the present day one of finding ever new ways to discredit those who wish to look into them. 1487. So much is slandering the political opponent a common practice nowadays that its only saving grace can be that, with rare exceptions, it doesn't lead to horrible consequences. If there be another, it's that it maintains itself on the same level as professional wrestling. 1488. Is it possible that corporate capitalism has found a way to claim the moral high ground in human affairs by a new development related to, if not genuinely grounded in, Marxism? And is it possible this has happened despite the fact it still remains what Marx himself so vehemently opposed, namely, the rich getting richer at the expense of the poor? 1489. Just as bad decisions cast in bronze can lead to disaster, so good ones put on ice. 1490. The great trick on the moral scene today is to magnify relatively distant threats or minor social injustices to the exclusion of much nearer or greater ones. The victims of war and poverty, for example, get short shrift because money and power have no place there to erect the facade of a social conscience. 1491. In politics there are only two policies which perdure, winning at all costs and the end justifies the means. 1492. Wittgenstein says in the Tractatus, what we cannot talk about, we must pass over in silence. True, one might agree, as tautology or mystery, but has this ever prevented anyone from talking about what they don't know? Has it not in fact incited everyone throughout all time, be they theorists, myth-makers, or whatever, to put their 2 cents in? 1493. A paradise turned into a hellhole. How does it happen? Just let a war break out. 1494. There are few heroes if what is understood as the basis of heroism is the willingness to risk much and perhaps all. 1495. Do the governments of the world, acting in cooperation, always do the right thing? Well, not if one considers such historical events as the Evian-la-Bains Conference where, in 1938, 32 countries got together to discuss the problem of the large number of Jews and, in particular, Jewish children who were slotted to leave Germany. It hardly needs to be said that, as humanitarian cause, it failed. 1496. A system, an institution, a state can afford a certain amount of stupidity. But if the latter ends up, God forbid, running the whole show, then, woe, the whole will shortly be out control. Ever prevented any? 1497. We have stupid running the planet now, and it's only a matter of time before more people realize it can pass itself off as smartness. 1498. Many would rather have the news spice up their lives than be 100% accurate. Some, in fact, will settle for 50% and less. 1499. It's a hateful thing to say, and perhaps only to be said in an aphorism, but without the most frequent, widespread, and harmful affliction humanity knows, there would be hardly any history. 1500. Few there are who, having to choose between losing their livelihood and living a lie, will opt for the former as the lesser of 2 evils.